Welcome to Public Comment. I'm John Dunbar, former mayor of Yountville.
And I'm Alfredo Pedroza, farmer.
I'm Grant Long, local vintner, A&R Winery, and Reverie Wine.
Thank you for joining us as we talk about politics and people and whatever else Grant wants to. We've lost the magic, the storytelling.
I'll always go back to it. Authenticity is what people come to Napa for.
We just have to figure out how do you continue to make it magical.
As we all know, the greatest wine in the world is one you share.
What we are selling, the collective, people still want it.
Alfredo, why don't you introduce our guest?
All right, John. Well, I think before we do that, I'm having this image of Grant right here with that cowboy hat and the American flag in the back. I think it's so patriotic, but
good composition.
I agree. Some would say it's intentional, but look, I think for Grant to talk a little bit about, his background from, living in Napa to raising a family to having two wineries, I think that's a really good perspective. We've had a lot of guests on this show, John, and what's always kind of magical is when people give us that personal perspective of what it's like. And while some people think it's romantic to own wineries, I've seen this guy in not romantic states. It's hard, right? You were on the road recently, and we kind of got to hear a little bit about how that was. So I think maybe just start with some of your background and how you got here.
Yeah. So moved to Napa when I was just a kid, 11 years old. Family was not in the business, not connected to the wine business of any aspect, but that trip to Napa helped me with some introductions to kids that I grew up with, and one of them's father was a home winemaker. And I got to see it firsthand, making wine in his garage. And when you grow up as a kid, you think wine is made by guys in lab coats and, with
Not romantic at all.
10-year degrees and all this other stuff. It was absolutely fascinating to me to watch an electrician make wine in his garage, and it be really good on top of it. So I remember going home telling my parents, like, this really fascinates me. I want to try to make wine in the garage. I think it was 17 at the time, and it did not go over well.
But your parents had no wine background at all.
No wine background at all. My dad was a traveling salesman, so he knew a lot about drinking wine in a restaurant or in a business meeting. But outside of that, that was it. Yeah. No, I just loved it. I love Napa. I think it's an amazing place, and I never really wanted to leave. From the time I graduated high school, kept making wine, kept playing, ended up dropping out at the end of my second year of college, came back and immediately got a job in the business and just pulling hoses and trying to learn the business from the ground up.
So you got through that grunt work stage, and now you're in, not only the creating of great wine, but also the business part of it. As Alfredo was saying, what is it like, especially these days, to own wineries and to really not only make the product, but how you present the product and sell the product
and have payroll and have to buy grapes.
Business. Yeah.
Yeah. It's, you skipped over a little bit of time there, but yes, fast forward to owning wineries.
Go back.
Well, no, I think the more interesting part is getting to the point where you're running the payroll, got the mortgages, got the taxes, and yet you're still trying to hold on to the romance. You're still trying to hold on to what got you into the business. And I think that's always been the hard part. I think for me, fast forward 20 years, to try to keep and hold on to that. Being a small business in Napa, and getting into the wine business, the barrier of entry is actually pretty small. Like, you can go buy a half ton of grapes somewhere, you make a couple phone calls, find a friend, he'll make the wine at their winery. It's a relatively easy process to get involved. I'm not trying to make the comparison of a drug dealer getting you in early.
Are you saying you need grapes?
Yeah. No grapes. Plenty of grapes right now. Plenty of grapes. But that process of getting started was easy. It's when it starts to grow into hundreds of cases, and then you reach that point where the side hustle and your day job start to conflict.
But when did you decide to make this like a life commitment? Because you work with your wife, right?
Yeah.
You're a team, and you're all in, right? Like, there's no halvesies. It's not a hobby. You are all in.
We're all in 24 hours a day. People ask all the time, like, how much work is it? And I was like, you lose track of the days of the week because Mondays don't matter from Saturday. My cell phone number's on the back of every bottle of A&R I make. It doesn't change.
They ask you, what do you do in your free time? It's like, I don't have any free time.
Well, I try to find free time, but it tends to be wrapped around business in some aspect. Again, being on the road was one example. But going all in was in 2014. We had our first Tristan, and Megan had her day job as a teacher in St. Helena, and I had my day job And we both were trying to figure out whether or not this little passion project of mine that had grown a little beyond its skin, the A&R wines, was enough to go all in. And it essentially became kind of a bit of a marital ultimatum of either like shrink it back down to a manageable size and keep the day job, or let's do this. I'll quit my day job, you quit your day job, we buy a winery and we do this. And so in 14 we did. We both quit our day jobs and went all in on A&R.
You make that decision though, Grant. That's a big ass decision, right? And
I try not to look back at it, because when I look back and
I don't want you to regret. I don't want you to regret.
No regrets. More like I don't know how that decision was that easy. To be perfectly honest with you, looking back at what we've gone through to get to where we are today, that decision was a really, really complicated decision. We both just were so passionate and so interested in the concept of a family business that we would own that we just made it work.
It takes perseverance.
It's impressive, really is. I mean, to risk, the comfort that you were experiencing with a little bit more of, dare I say, a traditional career path, to follow the passion. That's
every
the only
2-week paycheck.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that in a long time.
Well, I can relate going all in as being a farmer, John. Like, I understand that hard decision that Grant had to make.
Really,
I'm just looking at this farmer and this farmer.
No. Look, I was in the vineyards this morning, but let's stay on course here, John. Grant, you were on the road, and it's something we've talked about, right?
Yeah.
Of Napa's going through this time, right, where there's a lot of criticism by some of our favorite papers. And some of it's like, it creates doubt of like, what do people actually think of Napa, right? Napa as a whole, right? Capital, but you were out there, you're selling wine. What was your response from people?
At the end of the day, I mean, there's a lot of romance in Napa. We can talk about the joking aspect of the romance of wine making and owning a winery, kind of being in that day-to-day back and forth. But when you think about Napa and history, it's one of the few things you can't rewrite. Napa's got history that is priceless. Yeah. It's produces some of the absolute best wines that will ever be produced in this country. It has the greatest concentration of growing microclimates and soils that you can find anywhere.
You're welcome.
In the country. And so those aspects are things that have drawn people and wine lovers to Napa for five decades, easily plus. And I think that just in the recent years, and I don't know if it's a post-COVID thing or whatever it may be, I think there's a lot of mystique that's been lost. A lot of that connection to Napa. And when we're here in Napa, we see it through, our statistics, right? Visitation, sales, and they're all dots on a graph. And so if you have enough dots in an area, it starts to become a trend and you start to notice it. But going on the road for a month and a half earlier this year really opened my eyes to what was less dots on a graph and more just a demographic of people that were happy to buy my wine. They loved it. And it didn't matter whether I was in rural Wisconsin, downtown Chicago, or all the way down in Danville, Illinois, someplace that most people outside of Chris Carpenter have probably never been to.
So were you hearing something different than what the media is portraying the industry to be right now, which is people aren't drinking wine anymore? They're worried about alcohol in general. Or are you hearing a very different story?
It's a completely different story. I mean, again, granted, if you joined me at a wine dinner, you're a wine drinker. Probably a wine drinker. So the audience I was pulling from was not
That's a solid demographic.
I was going to say, there's not too many offsides to that. But that being said, again, in all demographics I saw, from young to old, rural to city, there was no issues with drinking Napa wine. We sold a lot of wine. Everybody was really happy to have me there. And being able to revisit the stories of how I got started, how much of Napa exists, which are small family businesses, really, I saw kind of almost faces changing when talking about Napa. And when I started asking people at the end of the events, some people that have purchased a lot of wine, when's the last time you were in Napa? It's been a decade or it's been 15 years.
Yeah.
Like, why haven't you been back? Yeah, I think it's just not for us anymore. And you kind of start to peel back the onion a bit and you realize it's what they're reading, what they're hearing about. And all they hear about is expensive tasting fees, overpriced wines, hotels that are so expensive. And when I explained to them, like, no, I mean, Napa is actually full of really great boutique, family-owned, very reasonable priced wines that you can come and have a great time and really feel connected to Napa, the farming community. It's hard to to change that image that has become what Napa is
And I think
portrayed as.
Look, and I think that's an important point, Johnny. And maybe you could provide some context too, because you were mayor of Yountville, right? And Yountville had this perception that it was always expensive. It was always a little more exclusive, but you still had some affordability there. And I think that's the challenge that Napa's going through right now is what we are selling, the collective we, resonates. People still want it, but it's a little bit of a perception and image problem that I see going on too. But you kind of dealt with that as mayor of Yountville for a period of time.
Yeah, there are enough people that wanted to experience Yountville in particular, but also the greater Napa Valley. We provided a location where you can park and never get back in your car if you really wanted to do that. But also, we would encourage, check out the valley. I mean, every jurisdiction's different. You get a different experience in Calistoga, St. Helena, Yountville, American Canyon, Napa, and the
You're
hills.
baiting me. I'm not going to
I
go
know.
there.
I was
I'm
wondering
not
if you were going to
there.
pick on that, but it's true. And you're also seeing people that are coming here for the hiking trails, and they're bringing their bikes and they're riding up the Vine Trail or whatever it is. And so what I have seen, and this is me as a consumer, not a business owner, people are looking for different experiences to add to the wine experience. When I moved to Yountville in 1998, tasting rooms were basically bars. You stood at a bar and you got 2 ounces of 5 different things.
You got the 3-page pamphlet with frequently asked questions on the back.
Yeah, and oyster crackers.
Yep.
And that was your tasting experience. And then you go to the next one and it was exactly the same. And so people forget how far the experience in Napa Valley has evolved from those days.
But, I mean, one of the things that got me into wine was my dad, again, had a little garage closet that he called his wine cellar. It held probably 100 bottles. And as a kid growing up, I'd watch my dad, the ceremonial aspect of wine, right? You'd pull out a bottle. I was just a kid, but it was pretty perceptive to watch that this was a special moment, right? And he'd be opening the wine. 90% of the gratification he got out of that bottle was in retelling the story of how he got it, where he was, who he met, the name of the dog, the dirt road he drove down. That piece was really important. And when you look back at what made Napa what it was the story. It was the story. It's the experience. It's that visit to Napa Valley that you got to take home. And whether you took home 1 bottle or 12 or more, every bottle you reopened at home, you got to revisit that story. You got to retell that story. And as we all know, the greatest wine in the world is one you share, right? It's not the one you drink by yourself. So that story gets retold to multiple people. Those people hear that story. They say, I want to go to Napa. I want to own a piece of that story. I want to have my own experience. I think less and less people are making that trip home and retelling a story that people want to revisit.
So on that note though, Grant, do you think part of it is, you mentioned costs, right? As something you heard back when you were traveling. But we as legislators or former legislators, right, you kind of believe in the free market. And you and I have talked about this before, right? So hotels set a price. Mm-hmm. It's no secret. I go to Don Giovanni's often. It's getting more expensive to have my beet salad or my steak. That's just a free market at work. Mm-hmm. So what's the role though, right? Like, how do you try to have this equilibrium? Because before, you're right, we had this equilibrium that worked. That's, you could argue, a little bit out of balance right now. But what's the fix?
I think the strings of economics have proven it's out of balance. I don't think it's even an opinion right now. I don't think anybody would argue with it. Just the fact that there's, what was it announced this morning, 100,000 tons of grapes that will go unpicked. That's a realistic number that is telling us that for the first time in anybody's history in Napa Valley, we're dealing with a problem.
But let's go back though. So it's not just grapes, though, right? It's hotel pricing. It's the cost of going out to lunch and dinner and tasting.
Yeah, but I constantly bring up the fact that the wineries are at the top of the apex.
Oh, completely agree.
So I think wineries get picked on all the time, which is fine. Some deserve it, some don't. But at the top of the apex, if you don't have wineries, for the most part, you don't need grapes, at least from Napa. You certainly don't need hotels and fancy restaurants. The wineries and the visitation and the creation of wine in Napa is where the trickle-down effect comes, right? And so all those pieces play a role. But if the wineries can't get to the point where they're successful, then the trickle-down doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many hotel rooms that say they want to charge X or Y. If someone doesn't want to come here,
well, look,
the strings of economics will make sure they don't.
It's really messaging. And again, kind of building on those experiences, because to get back to your question about Yountville, I think one of the key components to the Yountville experience was adding the culinary component to the wine component. And so we happen to be able to have a concentration of really exceptional restaurants that people can use to literally pair their wine experience in the Napa Valley.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen those grow in other parts of the valley. We're seeing it in other jurisdictions, regionally and the Northwest and other places that are adding, to enhance the wine. You're having great locally sourced seasonal food experiences. And I think the storytelling part is critical. You're right. I think it's almost too much business and not enough color, the people, the history, especially because there are so many families that still own and operate and have the multi-generational storytelling that they can tell. But it's almost become such a business that we've lost that kind of the magic, the storytelling.
Well, we grew up though, John, right? I look at it as you said, right? You in law, Grant's right. There is a
Is
paradigm
that being
here.
recorded?
Yeah,
Did someone say that?
This
not
is
being
recorded. You can
Okay.
call on it
Just wanna
anytime.
make sure.
with caveats and conditions, right? It does all start with the wineries being successful.
Yes.
I agree with that. And you can't do shit for growers, right? If wineries succeed, growers will succeed. But I think what's happened though is you have hospitality that grew, hotels, restaurants. And now you have this copacetic relationship of everyone's trying to figure it out, right? It is business because the pressures that vintners face, hotels face, the pressures that hotels face, restaurants face. But the problem that I see is there's gaps, right? In terms of the pressure points you're facing, hotels are facing, and restaurants are facing. But we all need it to succeed, right? And to me, that's why I think you being on the road and hearing that feedback, Grant, we need more of that, right? Because Paso's trying to compete. Sonoma's not even in the game, so we don't have to talk about them. I can say that. But there's all these regions wanting to do what we have, and we have it, but it's not a guarantee.
Correct.
Right. And that to me is part of the challenges you face every day.
Well, we as a community, and this goes top to bottom, this is not like Grant Long, small family, this isn't Gallo. This is like an industry as a whole.
Yeah.
Should be seeing the red flags. These are red flags that, we're not going to all get together in a room and come up with a strategy and fix this overnight. But as a whole, we all need to see these red flags and do what we can on our end to change that outcome, change that rhetoric, and hopefully get things back to Napa.
But I agree. It's just hard. We are so fragmented, and it's just the nature, right? You have 5 or 4 industry groups, right? Everyone's trying to justify their dues. You pay dues to all these groups, and you question what's the return on investment. But I agree with you. I think the flags aren't yellow anymore. I think when we first started talking, I was like, hey, they're yellow flags. Now it's like, oh, fuck, they're red flags.
Well,
on a big pole.
3 or 4 months ago, I was still hearing people being optimistic about the fact that, they don't have any contracts on their grapes. They haven't had any contracts for 2 years, but it's going to happen. It's going to happen. And I get this image of that ostrich, that cartoon ostrich with his head in the sand. It's like, and eventually at some point you have to pull your head out of the sand and realize, we got to fix this. We can't just keep hoping it gets better. I think that over the last couple decades, just like a commodity of any value, diamonds or anything else, values go up, interested parties change. And so you have, over the last 2 decades, an extremely interested corporate investment in Napa. They're looking at land as a huge investment of value that has gone up every single year since Napa essentially existed in the wine world. And those investments are amazing. That's actually helping Napa continue to diversify what it's at. But once you lose some of that balance of understanding that you still have to have the incubators, because the land's value is directly associated to the perception of the wine made from it. It has no metric outside of that. Tomorrow, if wine could be sold for $20 a bottle, and that's it, because that's what people are willing to pay, that land is now worth significantly less.
That's crazy talk. I don't like that talk as a landowner. But let's make it fun, right? So you have club members, and I always find this fascinating, right? Like whether they're from Texas and New York or Florida, wherever.
God bless Texas.
Yeah, we love Texas. How is it like to try to meet their expectations, right? Because, some they come back and they want to meet you, they want to taste your wine.
I honestly, I'll always go back to it. Authenticity is what people come to Napa for. No one believes it. Everybody wants to build the gilded sinks and the marble columns and the whatever it may be. But when people come here, they want to relate.
I'm going to drink your wine, by the way.
Yeah, they want to relate. They don't want to come and feel small. They want to come and be able to go like, he's like me. It's a hardworking guy doing something that's really authentic and great and producing a great product with a great story. I think that's being lost in Napa's visit.
But why though? Is it just economic pressures? Is it the corporate feel?
I don't know. Again, our two small wineries are 100% DTC. They're all private.
What does that mean? Just
direct to consumer. Apologize. And so that essentially means like our line, our company line, is that it would have been like visiting Napa Valley in the 70s or 80s. You have to literally make the pilgrimage to Napa to have owned a bottle. You can't go on the internet and buy it on our website unless you're an already existing club member and have a login. So someone Googling couldn't buy it. You can't go into a local restaurant or retail store and purchase it. You have to come to Napa. And
was that an intentional strategy for you?
Absolutely. I think when you're really small, you take your weaknesses and turn them into strengths. I think when I got first started, no one cared about who I was. So getting a placement somewhere wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
And by the time people were interested in me in ratings or distributions and things, we were at the point where we were just loving the way we were, And so that we're sticking with that. We're not going to alter from that. And I think that's one of the pieces that makes Napa's authentic history so special, is to be able to walk next door to your neighbor, bring a bottle of wine that they can't buy, they can't get unless they buy a plane ticket. It's a special part of the story.
How do your two wineries differ and how are they similar?
So A&R will always be our baby. So when I started A&R, I was it. I was the owner of the winemaker, CFO, CEO, toilet cleaner, you name it. And that's not a strange story in Napa. If you go back and look at some of the biggest names, they all started with a guy and a vision and a dream. It just no one believed in. They started themselves, and then all of a sudden, it had some teeth, and people joined along the way. The next step was realizing that I couldn't do it all. That A&R will always be a vision and dream of my wife and I. But today we have an amazing set of staff that help us as both ambassadors to make a nice dream, but also ambassadors to what Napa Valley is and what we want people to remember when they come. Reverie, it was a amazing opportunity and came out of kind of nowhere. I worked for the original owner of Reverie, Norm Kicken, great guy, absolutely phenomenal business mentor of mine. Wouldn't be here today in reference to, agreed. Wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for his trust in what I was doing for him for 8 years, both on the winemaking and business side. But when it came time for him to sell his property, he had reached that second chapter of his life where he'd decided that retirement was the way to go. They sold his property on Diamond Mountain, and then they weren't interested in the brand. So it ended up in a kind of a conversation over what to do next, because he didn't need the money, but he wanted Reverie to have be in good hands. And we ended up coming to an agreement, absolutely amazing agreement, to take over the brand, purchase the brand from him. But wasn't quite sure where it would lead after that, because we wanted to make sure it just didn't get destroyed. It from there led to a successful chapter that then led to we should make another investment, and that's when we bought the property we now call Reverie Home off of Crystal Springs Road, and that was in 2017. We again didn't know where it would lead. We just knew we had enough invested people, many of them I worked with 20 years ago when I worked at Reverie, so I have a couple of staff that literally were coworkers of mine 20 years ago.
It's a pretty cool story.
Yeah.
Part of storytelling.
Right.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's also part of the industry that I think is really important, is the connection of a personality to a brand.
Yeah.
And that's,
I think one of the things that I also find fascinating, Grant, is you're a family business, and you're getting up there in age, right? And you have to start thinking about, what does that mean to be a family business? And, you're reflecting on that initial decision where you went all in with Megan, to thinking about your kids, right? Your kids are still young, but when do you start thinking about succession, or what does that look like? Do you make intentional decisions now to keep it a family business, or what does that decision tree look like?
well, I think that for Megan and I, a family business is always going to be a family business. I don't want to say that something can't be sold, but when we made these decisions in these tough times, we were doing it with the thought that this would be part of a second generation that would take on a piece of what we started. They would be part of the being able to see it firsthand, the strife and the hard work that mom and dad went through, and that this is something they would want to take on. That said, we also have watched family businesses go down the drain because a parent wants more wants it more for their kid than the kid wants it. So we both made the decision that we want this to be a family business, but if the children choose at any given point that this isn't what they want, then we support their decision to move on any direction. The wineries will be sold and we'll move on. But we're not going to go down with the ship while we have a second generation that is just doing it because they think they can.
Well, I've heard so many stories about younger generations that leave the valley because as they were young, they're like, this is boring. There's nothing to do here.
Napa's an adult playground.
Right. And so they leave. Maybe it's to go to school. Maybe it's to travel, do whatever. And then they start to realize.
Right around the time they meet someone and have a family.
It's beautiful.
That's really quite a place.
Yeah.
And then they kind of reconnect, not only with a family business all the time, but just to come back here and realize it's a great place to live.
Yeah.
And there are opportunities. And I know as electeds, we were always looking for what was the next experience that we can attract to the valley to be a value add to the foundation of the wine business, then bringing in hospitality, restaurants, all the natural beauty of the valley. But then what can we bring to enhance that? And with that could be more consumers that can, take advantage of access to things like the products you have that aren't out there, globally. They're unique and exceptional, but you have to come here to experience it.
You made me think, John.
Uh-oh. Are you okay?
I'm
Is your head
thinking
hurt?
right now.
Your head hurts?
Yeah,
see the
it's
smoke floating above his head right now.
It's like my phone. See,
Oh yeah, somebody's calling you. Are you okay?
but when you're talking about the next gen, and the question for you, Grant, is people talk about these young kids aren't drinking. Does that worry you? Like, do you think that's a problem, or do you think it's just getting overplayed?
Which young kids?
Yeah. So I'll go back and forth because I think that it's easy to forget that we have a pretty long set of history, especially when you look over to Europe and you look at wine being part of youth and how it grows up, and it's not a forbidden fruit. It's a respected part of culture and food.
Yeah.
I don't think it scares me that there's a section of our youth that are choosing other recreational ways to enjoy their time off. But I'm finding it very hard to believe that John Smith or Sally Sue goes out to dinner with their boss and chooses a gummy over a glass of wine. I just don't see it happening.
I agree with you.
Well, there are certainly more choices in the beverage world that weren't there. I mean, there was beer.
That's competition.
Yeah, but there are trends, and sometimes they're long trends, sometimes they're short trends. Whether I think the wine component, the wine consumer is the steadiest of all those. Maybe you could argue beer is as well in some spirits, but
Consolation would disagree. Their stock is down because of Modelo.
Well, but I think there is there's an aging of the core population, no question about it.
Well, but I mean, when you talk about that aging of the core population, that baby boomers was the generation that was the handshake generation. They were completely identified with relationships. They completely identified with doing business with people, not with entities.
Yeah.
And so as we see them stop drink or fix budgets or whatever it may be due to health issues, that what we're losing in that chunk, that generation, is something that cared about the story, that cared about the people. And we're not replacing them with a generation of people that have that same interest.
But I think
it's a transactional group.
I think you're right about the transactional. And we saw that in politics too, right, John, right? Where it became less about, hey, if we're in the trenches together and I trust you, right? No different than how you did business and how your dad did business. So I think this is a moment in time. So I'm not overreacting to people not drinking right now, whether it's it's a period of time, right? But what's made wine successful, it's the ability to do it well, right? And I think what Napa does well is we do wine well, we do hospitality well, we do dining well. How many communities have you traveled to that do that well? Name one.
And it's a culture. Yeah. Consuming wine, enjoying wine.
I don't know if I agree with you, actually.
Well, hold on. Okay, so
you
didn't answer the question. You're being a politician.
Yeah.
Let me ask him the question.
Disagree.
Right.
I think
go ahead. Please disagree.
What place has done
I
it
think
well?
many places have wine, like you said.
I said
But-
3 things. Let's count.
Hospitality, food, and wine.
Okay,
Right?
name them.
Do we have to grow the wine, or can I just drink the wine?
No, growing. Are you trying to exclude growers from this important
No,
equation?
what I'm saying is that the beauty of Napa Valley is today, Napa can be anywhere. You can be in Texas at a wine growing region drinking Napa wine. You can be in Michigan now drinking Napa wine.
Which is beautiful.
But-
That means
but-
we're exporting our vision.
but-
Phenomenal.
But my point is that you can get your Napa experience elsewhere now.
Which is phenomenal. It
So there's
still
a
has
lot
Na-
of places
it still has
that have
Napa
taken the
on it.
recipe
Yeah.
and are taking our visitation to them at a much more affordable and regionally easier
Well, agreed.
space to go.
But that means that they have the hunger that we had at one point in time where they're creating, these magical experiences based off Napa. Fine. There's a place for that. What I'm saying is I do think we have the magic sauce. We just have to figure out how do you continue to make it magical. And we have the ingredients to do so, not to get hopeful here, but I do think it's here because we do make good stuff. Clearly I'm out of it. You all have not, you've been nursing your drinks. I've been drinking it like a true person, right? So we have it. It's just, how do you continue to cultivate it? I think it's family stories, like what, Grant has shared, that make this special place. There's a role for corporate. Let corporate do what they want, right? But it's how do you highlight that? And to me, I think that's what makes Napa special. So, not that I want to end on that note, but I am out of wine, right? And it's Monday.
That's a terrible
And,
place
and
to
they
be.
turned my mic off. So
No, they did. You're still on. You're still
But
on.
so the point I was trying to make before you guys had to get in your little thing
sorry.
is that really there is a culture around wine that doesn't exist the same way, at least with other experiences.
Yeah.
And
Like the social side,
yeah, and that has really connected for, I think, generations. People are distracted so easily now that we have to work as an industry and as a destination harder to capture their attention and bring them here. Because if you're right about, you can go anywhere in the U.S. and enjoy Napa Valley
he's not right.
wine. It's not the same as coming into Napa Valley, but it's about also.
But it's Napa Valley's to lose. It's
So we need to sharpen our messaging and reconnect with people and also connect differently, because there are generations coming up that are looking for different things and different experiences.
Well, we also had here in Napa a natural incubator of small wineries. If you go back over 3 generations, there's been all kinds of lack of barrier entry, at least compared to today.
intentional in some other
In
communities.
some, but it's like someone could come in, start a small winery, and it would grow. And many of those small wineries from 3, 4, 5 decades ago have now sold for significant amounts of money. That's natural course of business. Like you said, that's economics. But if you lose track of that incubator, or of that barrier of entry for Napa to continue to have these small family-owned operated wineries that grow and become bigger, that barrier of entry is going to keep Napa from keeping the image of great wine.
Well, you lose the specialness of here.
that's
But
why-
you're going to lose the next Grant Law, right?
Well,
But that's when the barrier of entry
Yes,
is so high.
agreed.
That's what happens.
Well, that's why I said is I think there's some onus on, quite frankly, politically, on our community
Right.
to find a way
Those
to
politicians.
protect. Yeah, don't get me started. To protect and allow for a barrier of entry in a very small format to allow for these continued incubated small wineries to grow. And even if there's a ceiling that you reach where it's like, okay, you can't keep growing anymore, then at that point you choose to keep it, sell it, allow for someone else to take on that vision and dream. But right now, the barrier of entry for someone starting a small winery is the same for starting a $1 billion winery. So it's like, well, if the barrier is the same, then you're opening it up for the bigger winery to exist. Is that bigger winery going to give Napa a great image?
Yeah,
Is it going to give it the same image that helped Napa become what it is? Or is it going to help the needle push toward the direction that we already have right now?
Yeah, there needs to be more support for those small wineries that exist and even growers. I mean, it's a unique place to be able to grow the kind of fruit that we have here and to make it into such exceptional wine.
Yep.
There is, as I've said many times, every state in the U.S. has a wine country. Not everyone should, but here it should be this. And I get frustrated when people find fault with the industry about it's not, this or it's not that enough. It's like, really?
But-
Because most places don't have this kind of magic that allows for everything else to happen here in the Valley.
But we dealt with that pressure, John, right? When we would hear like we should do economic diversification, right? Well, we've tried that, right? Yeah, besides Redwood Credit Union that has that operational center out there at Airport Park, to me, you got to focus on what you do well, right? And we have that. So to me, it's like, how do you support? And we haven't talked about it today, and it's a separate podcast, but I think there are things that Napa County needs to do to help wineries continue to survive and to provide an ability to make sure they can continue to have experiences that meet the moment of the consumer today. Because, and we know this, like we're just going to go verbal diarrhea now, but like they have rules that are antiquated of yesterday. Like that's ridiculous, right? But he's governed based off that. Like how, and then you have to go drop millions of dollars for all this crap. Like you can't do that. So I think there has to be some release of that because we are dependent on the wine industry being successful, period. Hard stop.
Well, and I think you've offered today some insight into how hard it is and how important it is that people like you are supported better. And that isn't just government. That's all of us together as ambassadors.
Industry groups.
It's all the different industry groups that do grow out of the fact that
And
we
collect
are
dues.
a premier wine destination, one of the best in the world. And so it would be a shame if we didn't appreciate that enough to sustain it.
Got a question for you.
Yeah.
Because this is becoming a love
Is it about,
fest.
does he have more wine?
No, he said his dad had 100 bottles in his cellar. What do you got?
In my cellar?
Yeah,
Mm,
be generous. I've never been there, so I can't verify this, but I can call someone that can.
it's probably in the personal wine cellar. There's probably 3,000 bottles in the wine cellar.
Look at that.
But of that, less than 5% of them are my wine.
Way to support the industry.
No,
Well,
he-
but
yeah.
that's the thing is I always remind people, I started off as a consumer. In fact, today, if you look at like, for instance, the wine we're drinking right now, the reason why I contracted
I'm all
with the late Tom Kenefick on this wine was I had a bottle of his wine in Houston, had a bottle, loved it, called him and said, I think your Cab Franc is one of the best I've ever had. This is now going back 12 years, and said, do you have any available? And he said, no, I'm sorry, I don't, but I'll call you if something changes. He didn't call me. So I saw him at the barrel auction that year and I said, I'm Grant Long. I'm a young winemaker. And I bound it hard enough. Now we're one of his largest purchasers because 12 years ago, I tried something, said I really loved it and want to try it. So my collection is both R&D as well as the ability for me to try other people's wines and regions and interpretations. And, again, I think the easiest person sold is the salesman, right? And so I think kind of going back to our wineries and what we do for DTC, we built it upon what it would feel like to walk in the door if you walked in the door.
Well,
What
go
would you want? Both price point of wine, both hospitality. It's more of the living room that used to exist versus the tasting bar.
Well,
Sure.
and to me, I think what I enjoy about wine is just being able to, that social conversation, right? Where it breaks down social barriers. You're just having wine, right? And what I like clearly is superior to what you like, right? But you're going to enjoy it either way, right? And
I'm just letting it go.
Right?
He's picking on you instead of me.
Whatever.
but the whole point is to have those conversations. And it is that storytelling. I think to me, that's the biggest takeaway is like, you can tell stories over wine and that's magical, right? You can't do that over tequila. And I love tequila over beer. It's just different. But you have a product here though, John, that I think we've enjoyed it on every podcast. Think about that.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what it is because it's meant to be enjoyed.
Well, that's what I was talking about earlier about it having a culture, like a social identity that
Yeah.
is unique.
Yeah.
And one of the things I really enjoy about this wine is
Specifically?
you and I can toast to it.
You
he can't.
Yes, there
Cheers.
we go.
Caleb, edit that out, please. Well done. You got me.
That's the best.
I set you up
Yes,
for
the
that.
best.
That was actually really good.
Okay.
I'm talking about the wine.
Okay.
All right, John. So we heard a lot from Grant around, what it's like to be a vintner, man. What'd you think?
I'm so glad that we had him be able to give us a perspective that nobody else can. Somebody who grew up, fell in love with wine, the relationship with his father, and then how he really wanted to pursue the possibility. Because I think when he started out in his teens and early years, there was no guarantee he was going to be able to one day own a winery. Turns out 2 wineries with his wife. So having that perspective, and then learning about how hard it is, but that the passion is there and is still there, even though it is a challenge.
And to me, look, I've known long, but he's just a natural salesman, right? But, when you talk about going all in, like, that means so much to someone's livelihood. And the fact that you have people like him and his wife that made a conscientious decision to be part of the social fabric of what it is to be a vintner in Napa, you can't take that for granted, right? Because when he's going on the road, he's repping Napa, right? And you have people like that. Again, he was gone for a month and a half, away from his family and kids, right? Granted, he's building his business or supporting his business. There's cost to that, right? And I think we gloss over that, John, in terms of how hard it is to be successful as a vintner in Napa Valley.
And I'm also glad that he highlighted the importance of the storytelling and the history of the valley. And here we are sitting out on this harvest afternoon, listening to the demolition of some downtown
I was checking
buildings.
my grapes this morning, John. Don't be fooled.
Yeah, there absolutely is still that. But there is still an energy, there is a desire to invest in this valley. There is motivation to continue the legacy of the wine industry in Napa Valley. It's people like Grant and his wife that are literally all in, have committed their lives to this, and now it's all of our jobs to support them.
Well, we're doing that by drinking their wine, but to me is like, how privileged, to your tone, that and you talked about culture in there too, right, John, of this is what we have, right? Like, in how many other sectors can you get the principals, right? The ones that write the check, right? The ones that are, out there talking to banks about loans and all that.
And took the risk.
Yeah, that's what you have here, right?
Yeah.
So, the 1195, administration, building in Napa County needs to get the memo that you have people like them here that are trying to invest and reinvest in Napa Valley. They're not asking for tax breaks or tax shelters. They're asking just for the opportunity to do business here.
Yeah.
Like, what a fucking concept.
Well, I know that you and I are going to continue to do our best, as you as a farmer, me as a consumer, that we're going to support the industry, and I hope everybody else does too.
Great.
Cheers.
Cheers.